Live at 5 with Art International from Moscow. Headlining today, EU ministers are thrashing out ways to better enforce the bloc's external borders, with increasing pressure being put on Greece. That country's already been threatened with expulsion from the Schengen zone for failing to control the surge of humanity seeking refuge in Europe. Latest coming up. Also ahead too, Islamic State reportedly runs for cover to Syria's largest dam, knowing its destruction would unleash a devastating flood. And scientists claim they've broken new ground in head transplant technology. They say they're planning their first operation on a human next year. Hi there, thanks for tuning to Art International. I'm Kevin Owen. Our top story, then big news today, EU ministers still discussing ways of enforcing the bloc's external frontiers in response to the worst refugee crisis since World War II. It's seen as the open border Schengen zone's toughest test yet then.
Schengen est en danger.
We have no more than 2 months to get things under control.
Mais nous vivons avec ça, avec ces défis et avec ce sentiment, encore une fois, que l'histoire peut être tragique et que l'Europe peut se disloquer dans les mois qui viennent.
If Schengen is only a fair weather system, then it cannot continue.
It would be a devastating loss, so to speak. Of course, if Schengen doesn't work.
Do you actually think, I can't resist it, that the refugee crisis is sort of make or break for the survival of the whole Schengen area?
You know, again, I speak personally, not as MD of the IMF, but yes, I think so.
EU officials are meeting now, then, as I said, at the National Maritime Museum in Amsterdam, toughening those border controls, suspending potential free movement, even expelling Schengen member states have all been tabled. But the EU Commission's been trying to downplay the scope of the measures being seriously considered, saying suspensions and expulsions are out of the question. With more now, here's our Europe correspondent, Peter Oliver.
If Europe was a stick of rock, basically freedom of movement is written right through the centre of it. It's imperative.
Fortunately, today there's the Schengen area. The big idea was to offer European citizens greater freedom of movement. Now the Schengen area allows Thomas to travel virtually naked. The Schengen area represents one of the EU's greatest achievements. Today, more than 400 million people can travel in Europe without any red tape or worries.
What we're looking at right now is we may see the reintroduction of those border checks. The last time this was debated, we didn't see anything too committal from the ministers that were present.
We agreed to keep to minimum and return to normal as soon as possible.
But of course, we are going to monitoring the situation hour by hour, and if necessary, we will put on the carry liability into force.
I absolutely agree with my colleagues that we must look very carefully how this situation is going on.
Well, this meeting is taking place in Amsterdam, and the location is quite significant because Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, has said time and time again that he is very concerned about the border situation in Europe, particularly the external borders. He wants to see what has been referred to as a steel ring placed around the external borders of Europe. We're going to have to wait and see what comes out later on as interior ministers meet in the Netherlands.
Our Europe correspondent. The Schengen zone's been put under immense strain of late by the more than 1 million migrants fleeing war and poverty, as has of course been so well documented for the Middle East and Africa.
The moral human thing is to make clear, please don't come.
So far, 6 Schengen states have reintroduced border checks to stem the influx of refugees. On top of that, the EU's now considering giving its joint border control force a mandate to intervene in the enforcement of borders without coordinating, crucially, with the member states, and that's been proving controversial. All the new measures are being fueled by security concerns, but interestingly, just last week, the Italian Prime Minister warned that suspending Schengen won't stop terrorists. There's the homegrown terrorist element too. He pointed to the fact that some of the terrorists behind the Paris attacks were indeed EU citizens. Meantime, comment in the Netherlands from Amnesty International that's attempted to draw more attention to the humanitarian aspect of the crisis. Human rights activists filled a boat with mannequins dressed in life vests and sailed it to that venue where those EU ministers are now gathering to talk. It is a clear reference to the dangerously overcrowded vessels carrying refugees across the Mediterranean daily. Those shores of the Greek islands becoming increasingly littered with the orange life vests of new arrivals. It's a tragic scene. Meantime, Greece and its ability to control migrant arrivals is said to be the main focus of the current discussions that are ongoing in Amsterdam. Increasing pressure to do more has been piling on Greece. Recently, some bloc members suggested expelling Greece from the free travel zone if it failed to protect its borders. In response to that, Athens has pointed to Turkey, saying that the uncontrolled influx really should start there. It's estimated that 2,000 refugees arrive in the EU via the Mediterranean every day.
The only thing that will happen if the European Union excludes Greece from the Schengen zone is that we will have problems with tourism and trade with other countries, because refugee crisis and the flows of refugees has nothing to do with the Schengen zone. These people will try to cross the borders no matter what you'll do. This is a world problem that was created mainly by Western countries in the way that they handle crisis in the broader Middle East, the way that they supported jihadis, the way that they were sending weapons to these areas, and now they don't want to take responsibility.
Interesting side story to this. A petition has been launched by eminent academics from European universities to nominate Greek islanders for the Nobel Peace Prize. Residents of those Greek islands have been, of course, at the front line of the refugee crisis, saving thousands of people trying to cross to a bit of safety to get across the Mediterranean into a new life in Europe. Aris Chatsistofanu is a journalist and filmmaker. He says these Greek islanders have been real heroes here.
It's very difficult for a debt-ridden country like Greece to accommodate more people, but we had a heroic, I would say, response from people who live in the Greek islands that, in contrast with other nations, especially in Eastern Europe, where we have seen a nationalistic and chauvinistic approach towards immigrants and refugees, people here were trying to help.